It's a plan.
Discussion documents.
All right, we're going to get started. I just want to remind everybody that we're working on initiating a new protocol for Zoom meetings. So we're going to ask that if you're in the Zoom audience, you keep your camera off until we go to the public portion. Then we'll let people show their camera in case they have trouble raising their hand using the button. But it's just more, it's less distracting that way with people's cameras off. Okay. We're going to get started with the meeting. We have minutes from January 18th. I know some people had some minor comments, so we can make those changes and give them to Coco. But do I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 18th?
Make a motion.
Get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
How about January 19th?
I have some typos I'll give to, I'll move to approve with changes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, the minutes are approved with the changes that are going to be submitted to Coco.
Which are typos, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, typos, that's what I thought too.
Thanks.
Real point.
Didn't get that.
All right, so we left off chapter 9. We were almost done. The last person's comments that we had were Lori's. So if you're on the website, it's on there. Now, some of these things we may have already discussed in the previous meeting, but we're going to go over them again. So the first comment, chapter 9, quality of life, historical, cultural, and community resources. It's the name of the chapter. Quality of life on Shelter Island is currently under threat. More needs to be done to protect the historic, cultural, and community resources. This current draft of the comp plan does not go far enough. It's a travesty to watch what is going on today with permits, CBA, planning board, wetlands, etc. Too many people with self-interest, more professionals are required, and more community discussions are needed. Okay, noted. The comp plan has thus far limited community open public hearing forums, which is not a good thing. In 2020 to 2021, the public was trying to navigate the pandemic. Many were sent home to work, often with children in the house trying to remote learn, which was stressful and difficult at best. We did not have time to focus on the town's comp plan. Open public hearings allow people to learn from each other, share ideas, and hear pros and cons of all topics. We need more of this before the draft is complete and adopted. We need professionals to evaluate and lead our communities. Volunteers work hard and are committed, but some often lack the expertise for the roles they fill. Volunteers are not always treated well, which makes it difficult to maintain the volunteer committees. This draft lacks specific data. Many areas are vague and not specific enough to guide the reader on intent. And then there are some governance recommendations. The first one is the town needs to do more than the latest ethics code to eliminate conflicts of interest. The town staff needs civil service training on what it means to be a civil servant. Town foils are often incomplete, ignored, or difficult to get at best. Employees not cooperating with clerks, trying to reply to foils, poor record keeping, documents being destroyed by clerks, and clerk staff training. Desperately needed policies and consistencies in all areas, including OLM and FOIL laws. All employees and elected officials need to comply. Right. So most of those are kind of internal working things. On page 126, the Heights is both a national and New York State historic district and additional to the historic structures. So you make a note about that, 126.
I think we say that elsewhere though, don't we?
I do think so.
It probably should be consistent, I guess.
Shelter Island Heights Historic District. We just say it's a historic district. We don't specify that it's both national and New York State. Page 133 says all committees have presence on town website and highly visible. Some recommendations: keep minutes up to date, post public hearing documents when legal notices are posted, post agendas, discussion documents, and data minimum of 24 hours before meetings and or work sessions. Do not add items to the agenda at the last minute. Put the town's capital grants project committee back on the town website so the public can attend, hear, and see the town updates on capital projects, grant updates, discussions. Okay, so, I mean, most of this is internal workings of the town hall. I don't know that they require action items or comprehensive planning. It's more like personal management. And I know that we're working on all of these things.
I think that's key, is making sure that these are reviewed and that new chairpersons or members of the committee get the news, yes, you have to post minutes, because somebody might not know that automatically, especially when there's change.
Well, and we're in the middle of transitioning to a new website. So the new website is going to have a portal that has the agenda and then the minutes for each meeting. So when you go there, it'll have the current agenda, it'll have old agendas, and it'll have the minutes for past meetings already in there. It's not going to have all the archive minutes because we haven't had the time to do all that work, but it will have everything moving forward. So the new website will have all that already available, which will be nice. So we're working to get all of this done. We know that those are things that keep coming up as a deficit in the town.
Meg, I have a question
Yeah.
about this. So I was not aware, maybe I missed this, that the Capitals Grants Committee was taken away from the public? Like in
It's not
terms of like
taken away from the
posting or?
public, it's an internal working group. So it's really just, it's not necessarily necessary or appropriate to have it in the public. I
Right,
mean,
I'm just thinking like, even though most of this is like internal workings, maybe just the structure of like which committees and boards overall, like, are there some that we are not going to make public, or are we going to make them all public? Maybe just like,
Well, most of them are public. I mean, this is really an internal working group.
Okay.
It shouldn't have really been public to begin with. And it used to kind of be where Jim Colligan would give an update on all the projects that are
I do remember
happening.
that, yeah.
But it's not really that. Like it's transitioned since Jim has left, and it's really just an update on, where a grant stands in the queue, or if there's documents necessary to submit for a grant. So
Okay.
it's really more just internal.
Is there a chance that that might come off entirely? Like it may just stay internal?
It is, yeah. It's going to stay
stand-
internal.
Okay.
Yeah. It actually came up at one of the town board work sessions, I think 2 weeks ago. And so Amber then went back and discussed it with the committee, and it's one of those things where it's a flexible committee.
Mhm.
If people can't meet that day, okay, we'll meet, in 2 hours instead. And it's
Okay.
really just housekeeping.
As that kind of a committee, it's not subject to the open meetings.
It's an internal working group. It's not, there's no members of the public involved in it.
So it's basically the employees meeting, that wouldn't be
Yeah, so
necessarily
they'll go
public.
back to like doing the review during work set, like.
Right, and then
you go around
Amber
the table,
reports it in the
you'll-
around the table
Right.
if a grant is coming up.
So
or
that's
if we're
where people
applying for
could
something.
listen in or.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Page 134 says West Neck Water is managed and leased to Suffolk County Water Authority. That's incorrect. Contract says management only.
I think she's right about that.
Yeah, so I'll check that.
So on the next one, 149, I can add a little information on that about the tick disease. So alpha gal is an allergic reaction. It's not a disease. But we can update and say, tick disease is
An emerging
reactions. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or tick related, allergens or something.
we should add it because it is something that
Yeah.
so many members of the public are struggling with.
The reason that came up at a deer and tick committee, and Campbell, just clarified the
Right.
origins of the
Yeah.
illness, so.
Where is it? It says deer and tick omits alpha-gal, which is quite serious and can have lasting effects for many years. Yeah. The term public health effects is used but missing for water and wastewater. Nothing specific is listed or mentioned. Many of the items in the adopted 1994 comprehensive plan are reiterated rural character, preserve natural resources through land use, visual qualities, and visual assets, including scenic views. But when these items are brought up in public hearing for new construction, these items are dismissed. So clearly it's not enough. The 2008 version of the updated comp plan is more strict than in many areas of this proposed draft version, with the exception of the noise ordinance, which is less strict. Professional oversight is needed in many of the boards and committees, as well as the building department, especially land use attorneys, environmental professionals, hydrologists, sanitarian, et cetera. We should be supporting our town staff and volunteers with professionals trained in these fields, paid for by the applicants, not the taxpayers. The health, safety, and wellness of the public is at stake in addition to our environment and culture. Professionals who are trained in these areas, and it would be better to fill committees with people professionally trained in the field they are assigned to. To the extent that town money is spent, it would be more than made up for by future benefits and savings. ADA law was implemented in July of 1990. The town is seriously deficient in compliance and has liability exposure. The town is aware of that, and they currently have a plan in place to update. Well, they're working on the Legion already with the ramp, the PD, and the Justice Hall. That's already in place.
It seems like a lot of these comments were also picked up at the last meeting because I was reading them in the minutes. So, they're a shared concern and they have been noted.
Yes. OSHA compliance. The town is also not fully complying with OSHA regulations, and all departments, training, and updates need to be rectified to avoid liability exposure. I think that's addressed in the handbook, but I'll look at it. Page 143, preservation measures should be incorporated into the zoning code for private properties to promote less clearing, smart planting, smaller buildings, less accessory buildings, less water use, less landscape lighting, and other greener options to maintain the rural character of the island. And page 144, night sky lighting ordinance should be strengthened. Less landscape lighting should be allowed. Security lighting should be on motion sensors. No string lighting should be allowed for a determined period of time during the holiday season. And it should not be allowed year-round or in the summer.
So it probably means no string lighting should be allowed except for a determinate amount.
In the holiday season.
String lighting in terms of attachment to a house, or string like,
Like-
I'm picturing two
Like
different types here.
Christmas lights or like
Strung from
twinkle lights
trees,
or
plus,
strung in trees.
plus on a structure.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
They're still up around.
Still have mine up, is that bad? I just, that's what I
As long as you don't turn them on.
Yeah, it's been a comment ever since that lighting ordinance came out. It's
Yeah.
so vague and,
Yeah.
well, parts are vague, but it's almost impossible to enforce. It definitely needs to be tightened up. I think that's been a recurring comment for years.
That's also part of this educational program where you have to kind of explain to people why we're doing this.
Yeah,
And goal 9-2 does have control excessive night sky lighting. While Shelter Island currently has little excessive night sky lighting, excessively bright and widespread lighting profiles do occur at businesses and residents. There needs to be a review of the dark skies code for enforceability to control excess unnecessary bright and intrusive lighting and to reduce island-wide energy consumption and costs. So that's
so it's in there right now.
in there
Okay.
already.
You know, one thing that drives me crazy is this new trend in real estate offices that have their little iPads in the windows, like just blindingly
Blinding,
showing you
yeah.
things. Like, who's shopping for a house at 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
So why are those on?
That's a really good question. Why can't they just print them and put them in the window?
Leave them up the day, but then dim it. I mean, why,
Yeah.
no one's walking
Or
around
take it
looking for a
down.
house.
If someone's staring in your window at 3 a.m. looking
Yeah,
at
it's not-
houses, we have a
right.
problem.
So just in terms of her comment at 144, what you just read basically enforces what she's requesting.
Right.
Okay.
Right, it addresses that.
It
comment.
also has come up at the Silver Beach Association. So Silver Beach residents have written in about this a lot. So it's not just the Heights, it's other areas too.
There are a lot of lights that seem to, a lot of houses that seem to have their security light on all the
All
time,
the time.
Mhm.
all night long. And why is that necessary, really?
Some of them are blindingly bright.
Yes.
How about the other comment just above that? Is
Yeah.
that's sort of covering a lot of different topics, so. I believe the rural character preservation is, we've seen that in many.
This has come up in a
spots.
number of areas.
Right, okay.
But I'm telling you, driving around today, the number of huge houses and construction going up. is
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Really, every large lot and some not so large lots.
Just completely trees torn down all over the place. It's just like a big.
Old nursery property.
Yes.
But there were like, I was driving around today too, there were like 3 other lots that,
I find it very disturbing.
I haven't driven past the nursery property. I'll have to do.
Cleared.
Yeah, it's clear.
All invasives.
Yeah. A lot of it is
Olive,
underground.
bamboo,
Yeah.
invasive grasses.
Bamboos.
But I don't see them as getting rid of invasives. It looks a lot to me like they're preparing to build.
They're not building.
No,
It's
they're not?
Half that land is in preservation, so they can't develop half of it. It's going to be a nursery again, like it used to be.
Well, that's good news. I'm
All right, so that was the last of the comments that we had received for chapter 9. So I'd like to go.
I did have comments on 9. Yeah, I submitted them a long time ago when I thought I wasn't going to be here. Yeah, so I sent them back in October. All right, so quality of life. So my first one, page 130. There's a large section on recent initiatives and long-term planning that's specific to Sylvester Manor. We don't go into that detail with any other organization, not the library, not any of the churches, not Mashamik. It just seemed inappropriate to go single out one organization's long-term plans.
Page 139, I agree.
130,
130, okay.
yeah, it's basically that entire page. My recommendation is to just get rid of it and keep it the same level of detail as every other organization that would.
So keep the summary about Sylvester Manor with.
Of course, yeah.
And then just, yeah.
Yeah, just that
yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point.
that whole page can,
near and dear to my heart. The American Legion has been completely removed out of this chapter somehow. It was in the last version,
yeah.
but when they rewrote everything, the Legion, I guess, didn't make the cut.
Did it get put somewhere else?
Couldn't find it.
It'll have to be in here.
But we just made room with Sylvester Manor gone.
And the same thing with the community center. I didn't see any mention to that as well.
So let's add that under Sylvester, like, where we just took stuff.
We had a pretty good section in the last version, so I
Yeah.
had no problem with that. It was probably just an editing error. Or I could be wrong and I could have just not found it. I always reserve
I'll make
that.
a note to find the info, because there was a long. It's weird. I'll pull the old information and I'll put it back in where we just took this photo.
And my next comment kind of centered around page 136 when we talk about public safety. We go into detail about staffing levels for the police department, the fire department, and EMS, and what it's composed of. I think in this document, we need to look forward. Is this sufficient?
Right.
Is 10 police officers sufficient? Is 64 firemen sufficient? I think we really need to take a look at those volunteers and that staffing structure. And this is the time really to look forward and kind of assess where we need to be. Kind of tells us where we're at.
Right.
How
long has that been the staffing numbers?
I know the police department has recently gone up. I'm less familiar with the staffing.
It'd be interesting over X number of years to see if it has in fact increased.
Right.
Does this department have a long-range plan or a strategic plan? Anything like that?
They do. I'll direct that to the chief for long-range documents. But I know he works with the police commission, which is the town board as well, as far as staffing requirements and equipment requirements and stuff like that. So they do, forecast that every year, and they do discuss that.
Is there like a national standard per capita? You need so many officers per capita, or?
There are certain there's certain recommendations. A number of years ago, I think it was in the mid-90s. I think it was 94 or something like that. They actually, the state sent, or the town requested the state to come in and do a survey, looked at the call volume and, how many people are on staff. And as a result of that, they changed around the schedule and they did increase, I forget exactly how many new positions they created, but it was multiple. That was back in the 90s, the last time that was done.
But it could be that with the population has crept up on us and maybe we're just not keeping up.
No, of course. So, yeah, I think holistically, not just definitely the police department, but especially the EMS and the fire department as well. And this kind of goes into a later comment, but I think we're kind of teetering on the edge of a really big problem, especially the fire department. And I know they've talked about it. When you talk about volunteer organizations, it goes right back to housing and affordability. It's how much longer can we maintain a volunteer corps? And when we can't do that anymore, what are we going to do? We have to have some sort of plan. And I know they have a lot of good people working on that as well, but I think that definitely belongs in here, if nothing else, an action item to
There's no
develop a
action
plan.
items at all in 11 about police. and
No,
fire.
so I think,
Put them all
I was
together.
looking in goal 9-5, support cultural organizations and strengthen our sense of community. Then the two primary headings in there are promote volunteerism to maintain a strong and self-perpetuating volunteer corps of ambulance and fire department members while recognizing that there may come a day when paid force of first responders may be necessary. But we should probably add a recommendation to do a
Assessment or something.
what I had jotted down was ensure that PD, FD, EMS staffing is adequate to meet current and future demands. Maybe it's good for now, maybe it's not, but it definitely needs to be thoroughly reviewed to make sure that stuff doesn't sneak up on us. I know at least the police department, we have to hire off the civil service list.
Yeah.
We go off residents first, and then it opens up to countywide. Our resident list is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. There's less qualified candidates living and being able to move back to Shelter Island, which we've been fine for many years, but it's becoming increasingly challenging to get qualified candidates.
Even in the North Fork, they can't afford to.
And if we do end up hiring off island, that they're not on island if they need to be recalled for certain emergencies. We've had at least one officer move off island, with others possibly being forced off island. It creates a significant impact.
The study that they did in the 90s, is that something that the police department,
So it was,
Or can we put that in?
it was a branch of DCJS, the Department of Justice. I think that particular grant or whatever it was doesn't exist currently. I do know, I think Sag Harbor did a similar study a couple of years ago. I could follow
I'm
up.
thinking if we add in some sort of assessment, like what kind of assessment,
Yeah, I was
thinking if there's something out there that is done
I would
anyway.
expect Suffolk County would have some kind of guidelines or something along that lines for the townships and the state itself.
Yeah, so I added, Sean, so I have ensure that PD, fire department, and EMS staff is sufficient and develop a long-term plan or strategy to manage potential staffing issues in the future.
Yeah, that's good.
It can have multiple prongs to it with, possible costs associated. So
Right.
like we know
Yeah,
that right
definitely.
now paying for a full-time EMT is $400,000
Right.
plus.
Yeah.
For one person, 24/7, 365. So if you had to do that with your entire EMS, or you have to start paying for a fire department, full-time staffed fire department, that's going to be extremely expensive. So kind of figuring out that balance. And also with the fire department, you know, the average age is getting older and older, and it's gonna be harder to have guys who can do the internal work if there is a fire. So definitely all things that we really do need to look at. So I'll add that as an action item.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think one of the last comments I had in here was kind of go off the police officer staffing. For not all, we do have double staffing for a good portion of the day, but there are still certain hours and certain shifts throughout the week where there's only one police officer on duty. That's a significant risk, safety risk for that officer and the community, in that you're only one person and you can't respond to, you know, whether emergency or whether it's domestic, whatever may come up. If you only have one person, it's, we are the only department that I know of that has one person working at a time. That includes even other small villages. So yeah, it's just a significant risk. Again, you would have to look at the cost analysis and everything as well. It's kind of where I'm getting at, is
Yeah.
what makes sense.
I can't speak for other, the homeowners association, but I do want to add that the Silver Beach Association, we brought up this topic at our last board meeting about police presence and safety. And I know it's a concern of some of the people in Silver
Yeah.
Beach. I can only speak for them, though. So,
I know there's a lot of calls for more enforcement in certain areas when there's one person working on a 6,000 acre island. It's, yeah. It's, all right. What else did I have on here? Streetlights for the center. I think that's being addressed, right? Possibly.
Facilities master plan in the center, hopefully.
Those
Lights are solar.
What is so
Charge.
These lights, half of them don't work, although I did see them replacing some bulbs the other day. It's so dark in here. We did the tree lighting, when was that? December? Black in here. And even the crosswalk, there's people, they had the button pressed, you can't see them in
Still
there.
can't see them.
It's such a safety hazard, and it's, I mean, we want to revitalize the center. It's, you know, again, I know there's an issue with lights, but I think, you know, it can be tastefully done in the center of town.
Get the
where-
downward facing lights, those are.
Where it looks nice, it's-
hazard.
yeah.
The light, if you look, there are
Agree
lights
with
that
solar.
go a certain part of 114 here.
Mhm.
It used to be lit. I used to walk it as a child and it was lit, and those lights don't work.
Yeah, it's such a
And-
safety hazard, especially with the increased foot traffic and bicyclists.
I know,
You can't see anyone walking at night.
no.
And they all wear
I-
black.
I drive this corridor all the time, and it's scary because there are people
people
there.
wear
and
black
it's-
too when they're biking.
Drives me
Nobody has
crazy.
like a reflective vest on.
I think that's it.
Right. Solar powered lights up there would be great.
Mhm. Yeah, I know they were replacing light bulbs, so when we leave, we'll see if they're on. Did you have anything else, Sean?
That's pretty much it. Everything else has been discussed.
All right.
Document are we going to next?
We're going to go to chapter 10, and we are going to go to the the comprehensive plan update, public workshop and hearing.
Can you say that again, please? Sorry.
It's
It's this.
One with the seal on it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, the public safety's in that one too.
Yeah, it's in the. All right, so this is chapter 10. And it's utility, sustainability, and resilience. So in general, some of the residents disagreed with the statement that the island's sole source aquifer has the capacity to meet the population's water needs for the foreseeable future, but only if it's protected. And then so we kind of have two summaries. So I'm going to read the general summary and then we'll read the more specific comments. So one participant said that that comment was a smokescreen to promote centralized wastewater treatment and water systems, which they said could make Shelter Island subject to infrastructure failures, storms, and flooding events. Then there was also a comment about evidence to support the finding, and another comment that increased density on the island would not be supported by available water. So those specific comments that we received on the summary were that there are no options other than Optimum, whereas Verizon or Spectrum or pretty much any other option other than Optimum. How will we address the obvious increased need for electricity for heating and electrical vehicles? Drought management, include drought impact evaluation for all zoning and land use projects. We need a fast charger for electric vehicles in a public location. Near businesses, it takes 1 to 2 hours. For the slow chargers, it takes 12. It would be great to have bike chargers at the beach, and someone else said they agree. For goal 10-2A, establish a small group to investigate means of creating greater energy independence and resilience for the island. Their comment is to also to explore state and federal funding options, need comprehensive clean energy overlay to the comprehensive plan. The next comment is make a backbone of town center rehabilitation and redevelopment. Work on solving saltwater intrusion problems in peripheral areas. We need to move to cleaner energy on the level of utility providers for individual homeowners. Need to restrict dewatering island-wide, not just for pools. No new construction in the nearshore overlay. Who says we have water for the foreseeable future? Increased density will make sure that we don't have enough water. So those are the comments on the summary. And then the comments on the recommendations. The first one is no geothermal. We have a fragile aquifer. The other one is no golf course taking a community resource for private use. There's a small modular reactor on the 17th hole. Don't know what that means. Goal 10-2C, evaluate the use of geothermal energy. Someone commented, figure out how and when it can be done safely. For goal 10-5, prepare for and adapt to the effects of climate change and rising sea levels. It says in progress with question marks. And then it also says this is very important. The next one is 10-5A, develop a coastal resilience plan. Comment is that's very important. Zoning changes that would increase density must be evaluated through the lens of climate change. Focus on extreme events such as category 2 and 3 hurricanes and life on the island afterwards. Goal number 10-3, promote sustainable construction and design standards. It says be careful of subjective jurisdiction and policy is the comment. Make composting available at the recycling center. And someone said this is very important. The next one is I would like to see discussion of green energy options to reduce our carbon footprint, solar, hydroelectric, wind, etc. The next comment is solar panels on the dump roof and school roof are a community benefit. And then the next comment is that we should add composting for residential waste at the waste. So those are the comments that we've received for chapter 10 from the public on the boards themselves.
There's a lot of focus on investigating alternative energy options.
Yep.
Promoting it, encouraging it.
Yep. And
Resiliency from climate change and significant events.
yes.
Storm recovery too?
Storm recovery.
Which absolutely connects to where you're building your houses.
Exactly.
It kind of ties back to that waterfront plan revitalization plan that's specific on increasing resiliency. So we talked about a couple chapters ago.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other part to it is that currently the town, so for goal 10-2, promote renewable and environmentally responsible utilities, the town is currently undertaking a ETIP grant, which is an energy transition initiative grant, and it's an educational grant and informational grant. And so we're currently partnered with the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, and they're looking at the island-wide to see what we can do as a town to help promote renewable energy. So that's looking at the landfill to see if we can do solar. It's looking at all the roofs of all the municipal buildings, seeing what the potential is there. It's developing resiliency hubs in all of our primary emergency buildings, so that instead of just relying on diesel generator power backup, it also incorporates some kind of renewable energy like solar, so that that diesel energy will last longer, because it can be, maybe you're only using diesel at night and you can do solar all day, so it'll last for weeks instead of days. So looking to do hubs like that at the school, at the police department, maybe the library, some of these key locations. So the grant's looking at that. It's also looking at our electrical grid in general and what it can handle. So if we do end up doing large solar down at the landfill, can we backfeed the grid without frying the transistors? So it's going to it's doing an evaluation of all of that. So
And
it's
when
really
is that?
looking into it.
What's the time frame of that?
It's going to take, I think they said 14 months. And so we've been working on it for the last 2,
Yeah.
And so it'll be at least a year, year and a half until we have like a final report. But right now we're working just on the scoping, trying to kind of narrow down what locations have possibilities, and, kind of what would be the best benefit for the island. And that includes looking at things like hydroelectric. The technology is not quite there yet for doing something like that when it comes to like tidal energy, because we've looked into it, and they've done some in Alaska, a little bit up in Canada, but it's really,
Funding.
it's really technology that's currently being tested. So it's not as reliable, and it's still super expensive, but it's also super cool. So they'll give us some information on that too. So we do have a goal 10-2, which is really all about the ETIP grant and that committee, and working with the National Energy Laboratory to kind of develop a plan for renewable energies on the island. So I think that concern is kind of covered in this goal.
Fundy has like huge tidal.
Oh, yeah, but they have the most amazing hydroelectric plant there, where they only use the tide going in one direction because it's so incredibly powerful. Yeah, but it costs the residents like no money for their electricity.
Pretty cool.
It's very cool.
All right, so those are the general comments on the board. So now I'm going to go to the spreadsheet and go through the comments that we received.
Just for the record, I think those comments have really been picked up pretty well in this chapter, although you can see individuals are thinking like, don't do thermal, yes, do this. So,
Right.
but all of this is worded like investigate, so we're not committed to any specific plan, but then we have to do something.
Yeah, and the ETIP grant's also going to look into geothermal energy, because you can do horizontal instead of like deep vertical that go into the aquifer. People are concerned about piercing the aquifer.
I
So-
do know the WAC spent time discussing that like last year,
Yep.
in the summer, I think. So that was like a couple of sessions, they just talked about it, so.
So, a lot of those topics that were brought up have been kind of discussed in here, and we're working on addressing them. All right, so on the spreadsheet of all the comments we received online, the first comment was from Steve Sanders on 9/21, and it says, recommends establishing a small group to investigate the energy independency and resilience. I think we want to do this so as to maximize coordination among the Green Options Committee, Town Board Activities, and ETIP. Ideally, the same group in both. He didn't realize that that was ETIP, that comment. And the next one, 10.6B, calls for hardening and improving communication systems. I would add the same explicit recommendation for the town's electrical system.
Could you give me the number of that?
148?
Okay, because somehow I don't seem to have any for this chapter.
Yeah, I don't either.
Which doesn't make sense.
Oh, they're at the beginning of the spreadsheet, so it went with the number 1 instead of the 10. So it,
And I was just like, where did
yeah, it's
Yeah,
vision
it's
statement
helpful.
and then chapter 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier.
Reading away and I'm like,
The numbers did not
I know, it's
sort
like that,
correctly.
and
Yeah,
typical.
Under the visions.
it's under
under the
vision.
vision statement.
Thank you.
It was one
What-
vision statement and
very
then
top.
town.
Phil and I don't get along very well.
That's all right.
Excel is finicky. It doesn't agree with everything.
Senses my fear.
Okay. Okay, the next comment is comment 175. And it says, we need more renewable energy. We also need storage to get us through emergency power outages. After studying this with the input of Jordan Racky of East Hampton and their advisors, it is my understanding that the best way to apply solar to Shelter Island is individual rooftop solar. We do not have large parking lots or plentiful open fields. It would be the least intrusive way to gain a sizable source of solar power. We need to find ways to help promote incentives for individual homeowners to do so. People could be tied to the community grid if they could source their power from it by paying into it. Also, a mini grid would give us more security. So we do have goals to look into that. The next comment is comment number 200. See my comments in chapter 1, the Shelter Islanders for Clean Water and Responsible Zoning Statement, which can be found at this website. A municipal wastewater center system for the center. The plan clings to the notion of municipal wastewater. So we've already discussed this in previous chapters, so I'm going to skip the wastewater comment. An island-wide public water, we've also already discussed that. Okay. 202, comment 202. Existing infrastructure and public facilities, solid waste plan. Please verify that the town accepts number 5 plastics. There's not a designated.
There is now.
Yeah.
There
The
is.
town does accept number 5. Yes,
Made my-
in.
Made my year.
Me too.
Ridiculously excited.
You mix them with number 2s.
Yes.
But just a reminder, everybody, clean your plastics before
Yeah,
bringing
right.
it to the recycling center. All right, next comment, 214. In the opening statement about aquifer and water, remove prejudicial, opinionated language and check facts on page 151. Ground surface water management plan of 2020 is not an adequate guide to ground and surface water management, should not be relied upon or be in the appendix. All right, so, I mean, we have discussed that. Let's see what page she's referring.
Bless you.
21. Oh, just to the heading, okay.
Where's the prejudicial language? I might be
I'm not
not seeing
Quite
it.
sure.
That's the referring to that title, because that's been questioned.
Summary of key findings.
Yeah, summary of key findings, the
Yeah.
first one. The island's sole source aquifer has the capacity to meet the population's water needs for the foreseeable future, but only if it is protected. Shelter Island has an adequate drinking water supply system provided for the most part by individual private wells, but water quality is an issue in some parts of the island, most notably elevated nitrates in the Selkter, saltwater intrusion along the coast, and spot chemical contamination from old gas stations and other sources. Sea level rise will exacerbate saltwater intrusion into the aquifer in low-lying coastal areas of the island. Securing reliable drinking water for the future will require careful management of a system made up of over 1,000 private wells and 1,000 private wastewater systems. The distributed nature of both water supply and wastewater treatment makes comprehensive solutions difficult. Protecting the town's water supply will require continual diligent action at all levels. Water supply issues and recommendations are largely discussed in Chapter 7. I feel like that's a pretty neutral statement.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
Not,
I mean, unless they think that we're not doing anything, that it's like, well, it's just the way it is, you know, that there's nothing we can do about it.
I mean, it's just stating, it's defining.
The reality
currently.
is,
The
yeah.
reality is everybody is, for the most part, unless you're in one of the 3 water districts, you're on a private well and you have a private septic system unless you're in the only sewer district. So it's just kind of stating the current state of affairs. And in order to be able to keep things that way, we have to protect the groundwater.
So there was a lot of pushback about an island-wide water system anyway, because people
Right.
are not crazy about that idea. So it's a tricky situation here.
But it's not calling for any specific remediation. It's not saying, we need to do public water, or we need to do,
I don't see.
it's just
saying that
stating
either.
kind of the state of affairs.
Well, the finding is you've got a tricky situation here.
Yeah.
Because this is the reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Comment number 233. Support the goal of 70% of Shelter Island's electricity from renewable energy by 2030 and 100% by 2040. Shelter Island is uniquely vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. With that in mind, we should seriously consider limiting additional shoreline development, bulkhead replacement, and hardening. I support the goals of creating sustainable construction and design standards, a coastal resilience plan, and the appointment of a town recycling coordinator. Okay. So that comment's kind of just in support of what we have.
Isn't bad goal to have.
No, they're all very important goals.
It needs to be achievable. That's not an achievable goal.
Which one?
70%.
100%, yeah, no. By 2040, no. I don't think that's
I
achievable.
tried putting solar in my house and they told me don't waste your time.
Why not?
Design of the roof, there
Yeah.
wasn't enough surface area,
Yeah.
location with
That's
the angle of the
Problem I
sun.
have, yeah.
Trees,
My roof isn't in the right
sun,
direction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they said don't waste your time. So the technology is just not
not
quite
quite there
there
yet.
yet, at least for me,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it has to be the right
We were the
location.
same way in our house.
It's disappointing.
I've had it for 10 years and love every day when I get a bill of $12.
You know, I'm jealous.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to put it on all the buildings at the recycling center, and that will.
That's an interesting point, and that is, as new buildings are being built, new houses are being built, is there anything that can be done to encourage, probably not, but architects and homeowners to site their buildings or design them to encourage use of solar power?
I think there's a move among architects to, try to minimize use of fossil fuels for heating. And that would involve how you orient. But then again, if you want to be looking at the
Right.
shore,
Um,
you don't want
Yeah,
to
you're not
find
gonna
out
face
that that's
south
not
if the
south.
water's-
Exactly, right.
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of like green codes now, building codes
Mhm.
that architects have to try to follow when it comes to, like the energy code.
Mhm.
A house has to try to be
Right.
as energy efficient as possible. There are a lot of codes that kind of help with that. And I think a lot of the people who are building on the island are kind of more aware of it. So there's a tendency to put in like electrical vehicle charging stations. Some people try to put in solar. I kind of see that more and more in some of the new construction.
Yeah, there was one application before the planning board last year. I think it was a waterfront small lot, and during their presentation, it was highlighted about how this home was completely green. I remember that. I don't remember the homeowner's name, but it was like completely like efficient with solar and everything.
Right.
And they made a point of really going over, like, we hadn't seen one like that in a while, so.
I know there was one house that just went up and it has like all the Tesla shingles and.
Yeah, which are gorgeous.
Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah, there's solar panels on the roof. They look like it looks like a regular roof.
So
The house right across from Wade's Beach, right on the bend
Uh-huh.
there, has the Tesla panels. It's amazing. You would never know it was
On the
solar.
beach
it
side?
almost looks like slate.
Right across from,
Okay.
just as you're rounding that curve.
To have something like that. I don't know, probably can't afford it, but love the idea.
So it's getting more popular. And some of it is waiting for the technology to catch up
Mhm.
to what, some people are trying to do. All right, so those are all the comments that we received online. And then the only comments I have for chapter 10 from the public were from Lori. Because the Heights didn't have any chapter 10 comments. I didn't see any chapter 10 comments from Jan. Let's see.
How about this one? Oh, that's Heights, right? Is that one? Yeah.
That's Lori, yeah. So,
I really just see a tension between this kind of overdevelopment, use of water, the lawns that you see people putting in that you know they're going to want water.
yep.
And it just, there seems to be absolutely no, it's like a wild, wild west out there.
That's
What
where
it looks like.
the irrigation code is going to come into play. On the town board's list to update the irrigation regulations. And there's also on the table tree
Tree
clearing
cutting committee. yeah.
and fertilizer.
We better get working on that because it's happening as we speak.
Yeah, yeah.
I just,
And, you know, they're challenging topics in general to try to tackle, because it's that whole balance of, you know,
individual
Property rights.
versus absolutely.
you also, you know, you want vegetation to grow in the lawn because you don't want it to just be dirt. You don't want it to run
Right.
off. You don't want, you know, so it's finding that balance. But those are all things that everybody, I think, knows need to happen. All right, chapter 10, these are Lori's comments. So the first one, reliable drinking water for all should be coordinated with development, which is not mentioned. Larger development projects usually require more water for one reason or another. Clear required guidelines should be established. The town is responsible for allowing development that has threatened quality and quantity of our water. The property owner also needs to take responsibility for overdevelopment of their property. So some recommendations are restrictions on how many accessory structures are allowed to have water, the size of homes and accessory structures, irrigation and landscaping requirements submitted with all applications for permits, water saving equipment and fixture limitations, outdoor showers and kitchens restrictions, or explore solutions to prevent personal care products contaminating forever chemicals from entering into the groundwater, better and clear enforcement requirements, effective diligent monitoring, cross-connection contamination devices depending on the risk for contamination required for all residents on public water systems for pools, cisterns, irrigation wells, fire suppression systems, and commercial businesses. An example of this is RPZ or double check valves. Note the New York State Department of Health requires annual inspections on some of these items already. The public water supply owner is required to keep records of annual inspections performed by certified inspector hired by property owner. So, yes. All right, so just going over these right now.
A lot of these have come up in previous chapters when we had that whole discussion about zoning.
Right.
And the size and the locations.
Right. So water saving equipment and fixtures, that's covered in the building code. So they have water sense technology that they require for most new buildings. Same thing with irrigation. So the Suffolk County just updated the irrigation law to require water sense technology. So if you put in a new irrigation system, it has to tell you the moisture of your soil. It has to have a rain sensor, so irrigation doesn't go off in the rain. It only goes off when it's needed. So that's a very new update to the irrigation law.
Did that happen this year, 2020?
Well, it happened at the end of 23. Right now, there really isn't a great solution to prevent personal care products from entering groundwater. If it goes down your drain, it's going into your septic
Except
system, into the
education.
ground, except for
Yeah.
education. But I mean, I don't know how you take a shower and you don't let the water go down the drain. So that's something that technology hasn't quite caught up with yet.
I feel like we still have the informational pamphlets out here. I don't know how
Yeah.
great that is. Do people really pick them up and look at them?
What really speaks to the larger issue of corporations removing these from their products,
Right.
which obviously we don't control.
Outdoor showers, so it might just be floating on the ground.
True, but if it's on the ground, then most of the time it either gets picked up by the plants that live there and absorbed and kind of broken down.
They don't break down, that's why they're called forever chemicals.
Yeah, but they at least
It
get
gets
trapped in the
incorporated
plant.
in the animal's body, it's like it's incorporated in our body, we're mostly plastic now. Besides the bacteria, we're mostly plastic.
Yeah, we're plastic and bacteria.
Yeah.
We're living Barbie dolls.
Well, I don't know about that.
Let's see. Okay. Both the time. Okay, next one. Thank you. Page 151, electrical and communication infrastructure. Often internet service is slow or disrupted. Disruption on services during storms, rain or wind, summer disruptions, and slow service, even with no weather problems.
Yes.
Yes, that is absolutely a problem. I also lose cell service on a very regular basis. I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but.
Verizon is expanding their BIOS system on the island, is that correct? I know it's in some places now.
Yeah, they've started bringing it on the island. I think they were taking it down 114. For the most part, I know that we have fiber here at Town Hall. So they've come through the main corridor with it.
T-Mobile is promising we'll have Wi-Fi service, 5G service on the island. When, I don't know, but that's what they're saying is going to happen.
I think,
That'd be a third company would be, a competing company to Optimum, obviously.
That's in our plan about
But we
looking
have
for
that.
new providers.
Noted that we have to.
we do.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we do have that. The next one is we need more green energy options, support and education. We have that in here. Consider offering wet trash and or recycling pickup free or low cost to seniors 70 or older. Often this is a difficult chore for the elderly who may not be able to drive. Also to persons with disabilities, including short-term disabilities.
It's just, I can speak about that is that I drive Meals on Wheels and oftentimes I deliver a meal and I pick up their trash.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say.
they don't recycle. I mean, they just put it all together and that's maybe all they are capable of doing. And I understand that. It's just that there's a lot of people. I mean, we're talking, a lot of people are doing that kind of thing. So it would be nice if we had that service somehow available for them. I don't know how we go about doing it,
Yeah,
but
it's a great suggestion.
it is.
It might be something that the seniors.
Citizen Foundation can work on.
There are a lot of people privately just doing this for neighbors. It's
Yeah,
been going on for years, but
yeah.
But it'd be much better to have a systematic
Yeah.
attention to it.
And if you're seeing that in the Meals on Wheels program, you could feed that back to a senior coordinator,
I
yeah.
report it,
Yeah.
whatever, so, it's an issue.
That could kind of be added into chapter 9, where we talk about quality of life. And let's see.
Actually-
Support expansion of services for senior population. You can add something in there.
Explore the option of
recycling.
wet trash or recycling pickup. Yeah, that would be good.
Fit center.
It's in there too.
What is it?
I just throwing back to the fit center idea
Oh, yeah,
for seniors.
right.
Town pool.
Town pool.
In there too.
Can we all be
I've
Um,
been after that for 30 years, but that's okay.
so I don't have to drive to East Hampton anymore.
East Hampton has a town pool?
They have the YMCA.
Okay.
We used to bus kids over there just to use it.
Okay. So that's
Is that it for 10? There's no-
That's it. That's it for 10.
Yeah, I guess I made a note on the, on page 157 with the vehicle fuel supply. I said add a reference to the charging stations.
Okay.
Because it just talks about where you can get gas. It's just worth,
Vehicular fuel supply.
it's just probably, I just worth mentioning, I think.
Yeah.
See this more as a typo. Goal 10-6, page 164. We're still saying develop a homeowner's manual. We have one and we have had one for years. So it's update and disseminate. Yeah,
Yes.
it has a lot of really great information.
That means that all that, the tense change needs to be.
So let's
Update the tents.
fix that.
All right, excellent. Develop a coastal resilience plan. How is that separate to it? That's just 163 is the end of goal 10-5. Prepare for, adapt to the effects of climate change and rising sea levels, and it says develop a coastal resilience plan. How does that differ from the waterfront revitalization plan that we talked about? And if it's different, how is that going to tie in?
Right, so they're similar, but a resilient, like the coastal resilience plan is not as in-depth as a revitalization plan.
Okay.
So it's,
There was a point of contention during a couple of discussions too, I believe, the use of like what was going to be in the revitalization versus just the.
Yeah, they were concerned about the scope, I
Right.
think, was,
That it wasn't just maintaining.
Yeah, that it
the
was built
concern
without
was it
building
would
out.
be focused on commercial expansion opposed to climate change resiliency. But yeah, I mean, these are definitely overlapping goals. And I know the water revitalization, if that is something that is pursued in the future, say if, it's a huge undertaking.
right.
This seems like a pretty large undertaking as well. I guess my only comment just be that, I mean, it needs to overlap and there needs to be crosstalk in between those two initiatives.
Yeah, because the revitalization plan can have a very specific scope. If you
Right,
want to focus on one area specifically, like let's say Bridge
That
Street.
real pointer. Yeah.
Right, so like, let's say we want to figure out how we can stop the significant flooding on Bridge Street. That could be the focus of the revitalization plan. Whereas like the coastal resilience plan could be island-wide, what to do with the perimeter of the island.
Again, we talk about hazard mitigation plan, which we currently have. It sounds a lot like that.
Yeah, I mean, hazard mitigation plan is more like in the case of severe storm events and, things like
Cross Island,
that.
that was the title.
Right.
I love plans. There's a lot of plans going on right now.
now.
Make sure that we're not having too many plans, but everything's
Yeah.
covered.
Yeah.
And matches.
Right, of
Talking
course.
to one
Yeah.
another, yes.
Well, maybe we should mention that here on page 163 and talk, have the coastal resilience plan,
Right.
but mention revitalization plan, they should work in tandem.
Yeah, we don't want to plan in a vacuum here.
Right.
Who would be doing all this work?
Well, that would be
Volunteers.
consultants, and you'd end up with subcommittees. Like you'd get a group of probably
This is huge.
highway, PD, town board. You mean you'd have all the key interested parties.
It's really, here's a good example where you really need some expertise.
Oh, absolutely.
Just
You have
me
to hire
volunteering.
consultants, no. And if you do like the waterfront revitalization plan, that also has representatives from the state, it has representatives from the DEC, it has representatives from the county, it's Army Corps, it has, a lot of professionals involved. And the resilience plan is very similar, but it's just not to the same level as a revitalization plan.
If we've been looking at the high tides recently and looking at a shore road or Crescent Beach, I mean, the water is nearly at the top of the bulkhead now. I mean, those were storms, and I know there's moon involved, but still, how much longer does that road have before it's not there?
Anecdotally, I would say our water tables are as high as I have ever remembered them.
I'm 20
Now.
inches above.
We've had a lot of basements over this past rain where the water table actually rose so much it went into the basement.
Well, this spring, it's coming.
So
That last
Compton
rain,
Road is gonna
yeah.
be flooded.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
last
just
rain, I had it for like 10
stop,
days.
please. I'm already 20 inches above normal right now. Any more?
Well, I can tell you the WAC is very excited because we are no longer close to a drought status.
No.
So irrigate away.
During the only season where you
You can
don't
come
need
scoop out of my basement.
get you a giant ladle for Christmas.
Yes.
That's the trouble, either you're drowning or there's a drought. So
Exactly.
like by August, we'll be crying about there's not enough any water. But yeah, the rains we've had recently have been, intense.
They have been. All right, does anybody else have anything for chapter 10?
You're going to add into that particular section a reference to the revitalization and maybe also the, what was the term you were using? Hazard avoidance or
Hazard mitigation.
mitigation.
mitigation, that's it, yes.
Should we go to comment before it's 7:40?
So we're going to do chapter 11.
We'll do chapter 11 at the next meeting.
Before we have our next meeting, is chapter 11 going to be revised, given everything we've been doing up to now, so that it kind of matches what we've been taking out or adding in?
Yeah, I'll go through it and
Or at least red line or something that we know.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
and then I'll send it out to everybody and we can go over it in the meeting on the 20th.
Some of the comments for 11 may already have been handled when we revised earlier
Yes.
chapters.
Because we did eliminate action items and things like that, that we would then either need to eliminate in chapter 11 or
Evolve them into
revise
something
them,
else.
so they have to get revised in chapter 11.
Great, thanks.
So I'll go through and I'll do that kind of revision work. It's all right.
Thank you.
It'll be the first time.
Notice I didn't volunteer to do it, but it'd be helpful.
Towards the end of BJ's tenure here, you two developed a 4-page document on Southold's plan. You thought they had some good things you wanted to implement. We never discussed it. We didn't talk, and include it. And it deals with things like open space, land stewardship, managing town open space, active recreation, ensure diverse programming. I mean,
We discussed that at one of the meetings. I don't know if you were here for it.
okay, as long as we didn't get it, well, I was in the shuffle.
Yeah.
I've been carrying it around, thinking that
No, we did, we went
it'll have
over
to
it.
stay, but
I think we were like incorporating pretty much the whole document into it.
okay, that was the
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, I have notes and stuff on where it fits, but yes. All right, at this point, I'm going to open to the public for comments on chapter 9 and 10. Anybody? Lori?
I want to talk about a little bit about some of the comments that were made. Chapter 10, utility sustainability and resistance. New state building code, as well as many building codes in different states throughout this country, has, often standards that are the minimum standards of what they want people to build to. In many places in this country, as well as other countries, I've done a lot of construction in this country, and even in states where we have water issues, California, the desert, New Mexico, Florida, as well as other island communities here in the United States, as well as in Europe. And one of the things that cities and towns often have a second layer that are more restrictive than what the state requires, because the state is really your bare minimum. So I talk about that because my experience overall in working in some of these different places, they are more restrictive. They have, I'll try to give a few examples which may help illustrate what I'm trying to say. Plumbing fixtures, for example, for bathrooms. There's different design specifications and fixtures out there that are designed not only by manufacturers in this country, but there's German manufacturers, there's manufacturers from all over. And a lot of these, for example, rain shower heads, they first came out maybe 20, 25 years ago, you saw them, they were 3 and 5 and 7 inches. Well, they now make those, I've seen them as big as 48 inches. So when you look at the volume of water that comes out of those fixtures, they're usually equal to like a 5 diameter rain shower head produces 5 gallons a minute. So if you can take that equation and add it to these large shower heads, and multiple shower heads, a lot of these big fancier homes, which I have also built up to, I've actually done 2 40,000 square foot homes in my lifetime, as well as many in the 10 to 20,000 range, too many to count. So, they have multiple shower heads and multiple fixtures and showers. People want what they want, and, they don't necessarily care about how much water is being used or wasted. You'll have a kitchen where the kitchen may have as many as 4 dishwashers. Usually 2 normal dishwashers, one for china, another one for pots and pans, that does just pots and pans with a commercial dishwasher. Your washers and dryers in some of these larger homes, even in a 6,000 square foot home, are usually 4 washers, 4 dryers. I've done as many as 8
So Lori,
washers and 8
Yeah,
dryers.
where are we going with this?
I'm going with this because there's a lot the town could be doing in terms of restricting, ice makers. They make recirculating ice
So
makers.
is the point, I'm sorry, but is the point that we should be looking at the building,
I think-
tightening the building code,
I think
or?
you should be looking at maybe deciding, if you're looking at your 6,000 square foot homes, what further restrictions? And if you look at what some of these other island communities or communities that have not an infinite source of water, or people are concerned with how much water are being consumed and some of these developments. I mean, Wendy brought up the perfect thing I was trying to say, which was, our island is exploding with development. And I think we should be looking at ways to,
So I think what I'm hearing you saying is New York State has a very broad, very generalized, but since we're a
We have the
specific
opportunity.
location, we should have
the
one that
opportunity
suits
to
here.
at least look at it and have that discussion. And as Sean said earlier on something else, I mean, I think now's the time to be looking at that and evaluating it. At least, is this something that you want to consider? If the town's looking at, the 6,000 square foot, do you want to limit? I mean, the town code already says you can only have 1 kitchen, but it doesn't limit what you can have in that kitchen. The kitchen could be, whatever you wanted it to be.
What would that be based off, Lori?
What do you mean?
So when you're placing restrictions, you're taking away, opportunities from that landowner. So you have to be able to justify that action or that restriction with something.
And it doesn't say you can't have.
And
But if-
just logically, it should be based off something, with a goal in mind. So I'm just asking,
It's usually based on how much water,
talking about water quantity used.
water quantity used. That's exactly right. So for example, when you build in some of these other cities or towns, you were required to give a list of fixtures. So and that's not required here in New York. You're required to give a list of fixtures, and you're required to say, okay, well, what are the specifications? And the building or the town or the city looks at those fixtures and determines, is this a water saving fixture? How many gallons does it use? Does it meet our?
But you'd have to kind of calculate what would be an appropriate,
Yes, well, that's part of your evaluation.
X,
You have
Y,
to
Z.
decide, what is acceptable.
It can't just be an arbitrary, I think it's 3.
Exactly. And I think that's what John Cronin tried to do with, right now the town is using the Hunter curve. But that's, in terms of, this is the existing water when the house is used when it's demoed. And this isn't what the new house is used when it's being built. And you can kind of calculate that, but you could take that a step further and look at, what new development brings and how much water is used. But you have to figure out evaluate that and then decide what that threshold is. But I'm just bringing out that you could be more restrictive if you wanted to be.
but I agree with Sean, you'd have to really have that grounded in some
Or
kind
else
of
you're going to be.
criteria,
Well,
because the lawyers will be coming out of the
we
wall.
have our fragile environment. I think we've got ourselves covered with that easily. And
Well, that's absolutely.
Show your homework.
Overlay.
But how do you just establish how many bathrooms is too many bathrooms, or what water use is too much
I don't
water?
think they don't say how many.
Well, that was just an example. I mean, the point is number of
It's that
fixtures,
you
type
have
of
to use
fixtures.
a shower fixture that
Understood.
has the water restrictor on it, and it can only use so many gallons.
Or Lori, the other solution is if that's what you want to have, you have to
Then
do
you
gray water recycling. And so then that gray water is recycled and it's used then for flushing. So that water is used twice, if not 3 times. So that water, that can be done. Houses are built like that all the time. So Shelter, I have to say, you want to have that, that's fine, but you must add this.
Exactly.
And also, New York State also allows us to have our requirements, more restrictive requirements. Some maybe they want to do something like that. We say, well, you must have solar on your house. You must make enough energy. And that's something the town planning board, the state allows those kind of really, we would call them restrictive things. But if you want the pool there, you have to do this for us. And we can do those things. We don't like to do that because we know there's potential litigation involved, but it's perfectly within the rights of the town to do those kinds of things.
I mean, a perfect example is, somebody wants an ice maker, you don't say that they can't have an ice maker, of course you can have an ice maker, but use a recirculating ice maker, so that there's no waste. And commercial ice makers have recirculating ice makers, and the commercial people that, could indeed use those.
So is this something that the zoning board should be taking up and exploring whether we should be having more restrictive than
I don't
what
think
New York
that's a
State
zoning
allows?
board issue.
Feelings at fault.
No.
Town code, we have to.
No, I think you would be looking at, first somebody has to establish that, and I don't think that it would be an engineer that would have to evaluate, First of all, I guess you have to go and figure out if it's something that you want to before you assign that to the engineer. I'm just saying that you could do various measures, just like you're doing for irrigation. You could establish, well, we want to be more restrictive, we should be looking at it, how can we remove more restrictive? You could be doing those things for other issues with building construction, is my point that I'm trying to make.
Okay.
So this summary, is that?
Yeah, we have
Somewhere,
to
do we have like a?
move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kim Nolan? See your hand up. You're muted, Kim. Still muted if you're trying to talk.
So skip to.
Did that work?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, I kept clicking the directive. Thank you so much. So this was tonight, chapter 9 and 10. And I just wanted to refer to a couple things in chapter 9. First of all, I applaud your decision to try to make chapter 11 comport with the different discussions and changes that y'all are making, so that next meeting, when it's discussed, it will have those in it. That having been said, I'm back on the noise issue. And I think that what was decided was that Sean created some language, which was review the approach to noise disturbances. But I think that everyone agreed was that that was to strengthen the noise ordinance, similar to what you said tonight, which was the commentary or the section on control excessive night sky lighting, which was once again to strengthen our dark skies regulations. And I think that you should put these words strengthen in the comprehensive plan so that your intent is clear, because otherwise it leaves the situation rather vague. And so I would ask that of you on behalf of the Shelter Island neighborhoods, speaking as president of the SIA, representing a number of them, because all the people in those neighborhoods care very much about noise and the wrong kind of lighting, because it is very much a quality of life for every single resident lot or home or abode on the island. These are critical. And so I do think it's important to use the language that shows your intent to strengthen our codes. And I know Sean Clark, who I have the most respect for, had commented at one point that, maybe we don't need the paragraph or the page on Sylvester Manor and we should just omit it. And honestly, I think that what we have for the noise ordinance is sufficient and serves everyone's interests, so that you could omit that one as well. And I have just one final comment, which speaks to Julia's questions of Meg at the outset of the meeting, which was about whether the public would be permitted to attend capital grants and funding meetings, or at least be able to view them on YouTube thereafter, which it really wouldn't inconvenience anyone. And you could just set up the camera and the recording, and people wouldn't be there at the meeting to bother you, but they would at least be able to see the critical things that those meetings portend about what's happening to the town. And I'm going to read to you really quickly from BFJ's Chapter 11 Implementation Tools.
We're not on the implementation plan yet, Kim.
Yeah, it's next.
Meg,
That's
that I
next.
think that we are talking about you doing it at your next meeting, and I would refer you to just page 2, paragraph 2, capital projects, where it says the town's capital budget is the next method for implementing the plan. Public spending on infrastructure, major equipment, municipal buildings, et cetera, all have a major impact. So I'm just highlighting Julia's comment and how important it is that that committee, even though it be internal workings, if you just took a recording and put it on YouTube, it would satisfy everyone's wishes. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thanks, Kim. Lily? You're muted, Lily.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just have one comment. Having heard you say, Meg, various times this evening, when we come to some of the big controversial items like wastewater treatment plants or public water, that we've discussed this in a prior chapter or we've covered this, it was very gratifying to hear you say that we're going to see what, in fact, the decision is and what the result, as you and the group write it, before the next meeting, and that this would be a redlined copy. So I'm really commenting to thank you for this and to clarify that we are going to see what we have all labored on as a redlined copy in Chapter 11 before the next meeting. And then the second point I want to make is it's really a question. Will you, as a committee, recommend a full GEIS? Thanks.
So Lily, I did not say it's necessarily going to be a red line copy. It'll be an updated copy. Whether I can redline it or not, I don't know. It's in a PDF. So it'll be whatever I can manage. So I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be a red line copy. But it will have the changes that we've made so far in the previous chapters in Chapter 11. And it's just going to be Chapter 11. You're not getting all the chapters.
I understand, but any basic software program from 15 years ago gives you a redlined copy. When you change something, it shows you your red lines. So it's not a problem. Thank you.
Anybody else? Stephen?
Just, I guess a couple of things.
Sorry, your name?
Oh, sorry, Stephen Jacobs. Just going back to the Capital Grants Committee, maybe I misheard you, Meg, but I thought you said that the meetings didn't apply, weren't subject to the open meetings law because they were internal and the public wasn't involved. I'm not by any means an expert or even very familiar with the public meetings law, but the fact that they're not public, I'm sure, is not something that takes them out from the possible applicability of the public meetings law, open meetings law, because that's the whole purpose of the open meetings law, is to make certain things public. As to their being internal, I don't know, but I do know that, for example, if you and 2 other board members had an internal meeting in your office, that would be subject, I'm almost certain. to the
That would be a
public.
quorum, so it
to
would
the
have to
open
be
meetings.
like,
So
yeah.
maybe there's a good argument as to why it doesn't apply, but I don't respectfully think it's either because the public isn't involved or it's an internal
So
meeting.
let me just clarify what the Capital Planning Grants Committee is. It's essentially how are we implementing the grants that we've received, and the capital budget, which is the budget that the town sets during budget season. It's kind of how highways using their money. It's internal workings on how they're using their budget, how we're accomplishing the basic tasks of the town. So whenever one of these things, it's like beyond making the sausage. It's like collect the steak from there and the pig from there. And then when we get it to the table, it'll go to the town board and we're going to talk about, oh, hey, by the way, we have our ducks in a row. We're going to apply for this grant. It's going to need a match of this. And so it does all come in front of the public at the town board level. But it's like the really basic, just collecting the information and seeing
Is it
like,
mostly employees?
it's employees, it's
Having a meeting.
Yeah, it's police chief, it's the highway, and it's the supervisor,
It
along
could be
with
the
the
clerk
grants.
and a bookkeeper
Yeah.
and stuff
And then
like
it's
that.
like the
It's
town
not the town
engineer.
board members.
No, it's supervisor, and then it's like Joe Fenora and the grants writer. And it's all these people just trying to figure out what grants we need to meet the capital budget, the plan that we already have.
So if I have a meeting of my staff at my work,
Yeah,
that wouldn't be open to everyone else in my work even.
right,
But then whatever we decided would be presented.
right.
I think,
But-
does that help?
but not completely. First of all, there are some members of the town board that do participate. Maybe not 3, but some do. And am I correct that one of the things you do is discuss what grants to apply for and what grants not to apply for?
Usually that's been discussed beforehand, and it's the nuances on how to apply for the grants. So for example, we know Fresh Pond is something that came up and needed funding. So capital planning and grants figured out what they needed to do to apply for the Fresh Pond grant funding when everybody said, yeah, we should apply for grants for Fresh Pond. So part of it is looking at our grant writer and saying, hey, these are the projects that are coming up. Are there grants available? She says, yes. We go to the public, hey, there's a grant available. We're going to try to get this grant. And then the capital planning and grants is the people who like try to pull the pieces together to give to the grant writer to write the grant to apply for it. That's what it is. It's that internal working of trying to collect the pieces to put together to apply for the grant. Now, we've already told the public, hey, we're going to look for this because WAC and WQI said this is a great idea, go for it.
I guess to clarify, I think the concern might be that there's extra spending going on or, application of monies that taxpayers are concerned about. So could you explain that it's not like budget season, it's not budget
No.
plan.
And in
that's
order
already-
to spend
the money
money,
has already been
you
allocated.
have to bring it to an
It
open
always has to
meeting.
come to an open meeting. It has to come to the board. Typically, there's a resolution. If you're going to apply for and accept any grant, there's a resolution done by the town board to accept that grant and to cover whatever the match is. So, it has to be already allocated in the town budget that we have the match for that grant, because some of them are 80-20, 50-50. So you have to know that you already have the money set aside. So that's all that is. It's not,
I think the example you gave of when Jim Colligan would give the summaries every time at the town board meeting, they were pretty extensive, and that's where you would get all the information. Plus, in budget season, you would know about the allocations anyway.
And he also made it more than like, he would talk about things that weren't necessarily part of capital planning and grants.
Correct.
And so since then, we've stopped doing that. It's strictly, the grants that we've already applied for, where are they in the queue at the state? Or, it's really just an update on things that have already been passed and approved at the town board level.
So is that your concern, Stephen,
Well,
about just
I mean,
spending going on that you
No, actually,
don't know about?
Personally, that's not my concern. My concern isn't that there's some grant that's being misused in some way. Maybe somebody else's concern. It's not my concern. My concern is that there is a process of figuring out which of presumably multiple possible grants is to be applied for. And your response, if I heard it correctly, was, well, that's not usually discussed, but suggests that it is sometimes discussed. And that's certainly something, whether or not the open meetings law requires it, the public would be interested in. So I'll
It's
just.
something really the grant writer internally would look, with the town says, we have these needs. And then this
There's
person goes and looks
opportunities.
at what's available. That, we don't apply for that, we don't qualify for that one. this one we might work for. So then the process of doing it is, in the process of the actual grant, I don't know if you ever put one together,
No, I haven't.
are incredibly in-depth. They want to know what benefits will be for these community members. How will they benefit from it? We give you the money, how are they going to? Then you have to have another committee, you have to decide, well, how do you see that's going to impact this? So you
What's
have
your
all these
timeline? What are your
people
what resources
putting
do you
these
have?
different pieces together to even write the grant, and it could be turned down, you know, and I've written too many, and it's just too complex, and it takes a lot of people to put them together.
It's
To be all their little nuances of what they need, you know, what the granting funding group wants. You have to prove, and all the ways, how are you going to prove it once you get it all done and that money's there? How are you going to prove that that's working the way you said it was going?
But the town board has already given the okay to look for that grant.
Yes.
So that
That's
decision
part of the
happens at the
process,
public level.
behind the scenes, and
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, this is something that the supervisor has also already discussed in town board meetings. And so, you know, they've come to the conclusion that it's going to stay the way it currently is. It's an internal working group. And she'll do roundtable reports on things that were discussed or things that came up, but it's just that, it's an internal working group.
Turning to just one other point that I made before, I think Lily may have overstated it, that for 15 years, you can take a PDF and another PDF and see how they differ. But I can tell you that when I retired about 4 years ago, my old law firm, which has never been cutting edge on anything technological, believe me, we were like the last place to get a fax machine, had software that literally my secretary could take one PDF and another PDF and 3 clicks later generate something. It doesn't look like, you know, in Word, for example, exactly the same blacklining, but it's really not either hard, and I'm sure, since we were pretty cheap about a lot of the things we did, very expensive to do. So if there is a desire to do it, and I would think for the sake, not just for the public, but also for all of you, so you can really see what has changed first in chapter 11, if that's going to be the next chapter, and then ultimately chapters 1 through 10. I urge you to do that. Thank you.
I'll look into it. All right. Anybody else? All right. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next meeting is on the 20th.